All right, chat, it is time for us to decide what are the best and worst 5Ks in Guilty Gear Strive. It's been a little while since we've done a move tier list. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be ranking all of the 5Ks in the game. And the two things to keep in mind when it comes to how we're ranking these 5Ks. First of all, we are trying to rank the 5Ks in a vacuum. We're not trying to really consider the rest of the character's kit that they're attached to. So we're trying to look at these in a vacuum, not compared to the rest of their kit. How do they fare on other characters? And that's the other thing to think about when it comes to this is, would other characters want that 5K? So if we're talking about a 5K, you want to ask yourself, how many other characters would want to have this 5K on themselves? So I guess to start this off, we should probably start off with a weak 5K and then a strong 5K. That way we have kind of a measurement tool to understand the different strengths of these tools. So an example of a probably weaker 5K, a 5K that probably nobody really wants, is Zato's. So in the case of Zato's 5K, this is a standing low, which is probably its only redeeming quality. The only other thing this move really has going for it is it's 4 frames active, which is pretty decent. It doesn't have crazy range, it's not disjointed or anything. Other than that, it's 8 frame startup, which is actually pretty slow for most 5Ks. You'll notice as we go through this, a lot of 5Ks range from 6 or 7 frame startup. So anything that's slower than that tends to not be very good. So this is just an example of a 5K that doesn't even meet like the minimum requirements of what most 5Ks are accomplishing. Because a big thing about Guilty Gear is that this is, or Strive specifically, this is a K button game. This is a game that like having good K buttons is super important, especially against a lot of the strong characters and the situations you get put in. There's kind of like a minimum requirement of what you need your 5K to be able to accomplish. And something like Zato's 5K doesn't even meet that requirement, really. So an example of a like strong 5K, or in this example, cracked, I would say Testament. Testament is like pretty much like the definition of like, this is what you need your 5K to be able to do. It's relatively fast, it reaches pretty far in front of the character, it's safe on block, doesn't have much recovery. This is like what you want. This is the baseline of what we're looking for. So I think one of the best 5Ks in the game, without a doubt, in my opinion, is going to be Chip. Now, the thing that's crazy about this is that Chip's 5K is one of the best, and it also happens to be on one of the best characters to utilize it. So one of the strengths of Chip's 5K is that it is a move that Gatlings into itself, and I am considering that for this video. I don't consider that like a trait to the character. I think that's just a trait of the move. It Gatlings into itself, so we're considering that. Interestingly enough, there are only 2 characters in this game that have 5Ks that Gatling into themselves. It gives you such good stagger pressure. Automatically having that trait is just very good. So the thing about Chip is it's 6 frame startup, which is really good for a 5K. It has some low crushing properties, so if you're trying to beat like, you know, like a 2K or a 2S or something, it's pretty good at going over those moves. It's active for 5 frames, so it's like incredible for space control. And it's only -3 on block, and it staggers into itself. So this pretty much checks every single box of what you would want a 5K to do, and better than most, because it's 6 frame startup instead of 7, which is particularly fast, active for 5 frames. And it's a absurdly good pressure tool. So it does everything, and it's also probably on the character that uses it the best. Okay, we can talk about Happy Chaos next, and I need to know, chat. I need a vibe check on something. I think his 5K is just good. I don't think it's actually cracked. For the character, like on Happy Chaos, it actually does a really good job. But I think for other characters, there's a lot of other 5Ks that are better. Like, I'm pretty sure I'd rather have Testament's 5K, for example. On its own, like, it's fine. You know, like 6 frame startup, which is good. It's not particularly active. It's -3 on block, which is pretty standard. Like, it's just a standard 5K. It has slight ability to low crush moves. His 5K is probably the best 5K that goes in good, if I had to say. I don't think it's quite cracked, though. We can talk about Jacka's next. Am I wrong in thinking that I don't think her 5K is that great? Well, let's take a look at it. So it's 7 frame startup, relatively standard. 6 frames active is pretty good. It hits kind of high, though. Like, it doesn't really interact well with, like, low hitting moves. -4 on block, slightly more minus than most other 5Ks. I don't know. I don't think it's that good, though. Like, would any other character, again, like, we got to think about it this way, chat. Would other characters want to have this move? Like, look at this list. It's like, how many characters here are like, yeah, I'll give you my 5K in exchange for yours? So I'm pretty sure Bedman's 5K sucks. It doesn't work how a normal 5K usually does. It's like kind of a pretty specific move, but it has a lot of bad qualities for a K button. So 8 frame startup, it's lower than average, which is not really what you want. It is 7 frames active, which is probably its best quality. Very active moves are nice nice for space control, but it's 28 total frames, which is a lot of recovery for a K button. Like in this game, you want K buttons to have low recovery, so they're low commitment. And then it's also -7 on block. It is disjointed though. That is like the one thing it has going for it outside of the active frames, is that it is disjointed. It's honestly one of those 5Ks that is more like a slash normal than a K normal. That said, I still don't think most characters want this, because most characters already have a good K normal, and also most characters have slash normals that are better than this anyway. So I do personally think, again, keep in mind the character has 5K into 5K as a Gatling, right? Gatling's into itself. I think that's a very, very high quality to have in a K normal. Is there a world where this is true? I think this makes it top 5. Like, I think that quality alone makes it so good. And then otherwise, it's just a good button. A Gatling's into itself. It does have slight, like, low crush properties, like a lot of other 5Ks do as well. The biggest downside, I guess, for this move is that it is 7 frame startup instead of 6. So it's a little bit slower compared to, like, Chips, for example. I do think it is better on Millia than most characters, though, due to her movement speed. If it is in top 5, I feel like it's probably the worst 5K in top 5. But just being able to Gatling into itself is way too important of a quality. Which, by the way, can we talk about the fact that they've never added a character since launch that can do 5K 5K? That's just never happened again. They gave it to Chip and Millia, and nobody else can do it. They've never added another character with that property, and I think that's really weird. Okay, let's talk about Giovanna next. And this one is very hard to talk about, because again, we're talking about this in a vacuum. We are not pairing her 5K with her dash speed, right? We're just putting this on another character. Do they want that? If you remove it from Giovanna, it doesn't actually have that many strong qualities. Like, I think Giovanna would actually rather have a lot of other 5Ks in the game paired with her dash speed. The biggest benefit to her 5K is that it has 6 frame startup, which is good. It's the fastest type of 5K you can have. And on top of that, it is 19 total frames, which is pretty low for a 5K. Otherwise, it doesn't have that much range. The hitbox isn't anything like super crazy or anything. It does have slight, low crushing properties, but most 5Ks do. She would rather have a lot of other 5Ks. I mean, obviously she'd rather have like Chip or Millia 5K, for example. On Giovanna, this type of button is really good, but almost any type of K button on Giovanna is good. So talking about Gold Lewis, he has a very specific type of 5K. So talking about how, 5Ks, they kind of fill a specific niche that you want them to do. His 5K is not that. His 5K is a low crushing tool. So his is 10 frame startup, which I think is one of, if not the slowest 5K in the game. It's -7 on block, and it's total 30 frame duration, which is really slow for a 5K. However, it is active for 9 frames, and it has low crushing properties, which makes it very unique. When it comes to evaluating the strength of this move, I think this move obviously has value for a character who can't move very well. So Goldless having a way to like deal with certain low moves in neutral is important for him, because he doesn't move very well. He's a very slow, big character. For other characters, I don't know how important of a property that is, especially when you consider the fact that a lot of these 5Ks that we have on this list already technically low crush moves anyways. So with that in mind, I don't think that property is actually that important. So I think for Gold Lewis, it's probably pretty good, but I think generally speaking, it's probably one of the weaker 5Ks in the game, because most characters don't really need that niche in their kit, and most 5Ks already have some low crushing properties. Going over Biken's 5K, I don't think her 5K is that good, right? Like, it's probably like one of the weaker ones that are in good. It does most of the things you need it to. Like, I think it meets the requirements for the most part, but it has some unfortunate things about it. Like, for example, it is 7 frame startup, so it's not even fast. It doesn't have that much range or anything. The only real benefits is that like it moves forward slightly when she does it, and it's active for 5 frames, which is pretty good. But I do think it at least fits the general purpose of a 5K, so it's probably fine. I gotta make sure I'm not alone on this. We agree Axel's 5K is cracked, right? Like, it's not top 5, but it's very good. So Axel's 5K, by the way, is 6 frame startup, which is actually crazy for how far range this 5K is. His 5K goes really far for it being 6 frame startup. It's under 20 frames total duration, which is exactly what you want your 5K to be. It doesn't really get low crush super well because of the hitbox kind of on the lower half of the move. So it actually just interacts with other K buttons really well. I think it's a pretty good move. So this is kind of another one of those K buttons that is like, this is kind of the definition of what a strong K button looks like. And honestly, it might be even better on like other characters. Axel is a character who doesn't even use K buttons that well in the sense of like how his kit works. Next character we can do is Nago, and this is probably going to come as a big surprise to a lot of people potentially, but I don't think Nago 5K is top 5 anymore. It used to be. This used to be one of, if not the best K button in the game, but it did get nerfed, and it got nerfed in a very, very important way. 2 very important ways, in fact. The big thing about Nago 5K previously is that it was a low crush move. and it doesn't actually have that low crush property as much anymore. So if you look at the hurt box of the move, it actually has an extended hurt box near his back foot now. It did not used to have this, and that is actually the big difference maker. And it's no longer 0 on block either. They added 2 frames of recovery to the move. So it used to be 0 on block and very, very hard to take advantage of when it whiffed. It is obviously still cracked. It is an incredible 5k. It's just not broken like it used to be. Almost every character would like to have this 5k. It's just worse than it used to be. Next character we can talk about is going to be Anji. And Anji's hit buttons, it's kind of hard to evaluate, honestly, because it has some like good qualities and then it has some bad qualities. The worst quality about it easily is the fact that it's 8 frame startup, which is pretty slow for a K button. Most of them are 6 or 7 frames, so being 8 is a little bad. But it's active for 5 frames, which is pretty decent, and it's still only 21 total frames, which is pretty good. And it does reach pretty far, and it does have some low crush properties to it. But it is definitely better than Bikins, for example. But I just don't know how good it is. I don't know how many characters would really want to have Anji's 5k. I personally think being 8 frame startup is bad. Like that is notably worse than being 6 or 7. I think with K buttons, even just 1 frame difference is actually very notable. So next 5k we can talk about is Maze. Maze is like very easily in top 5. It might just be the best 5k in the game, to be honest. I like to call this normal far/2 because it's basically another slash normal, except it's like one of the best slash normals because it's also a K button. This move is technically worse for Mei now because of the nerfs that they made to it. So this normal is just incredible. It's a far-reaching 8 frame move. It's only 24 total frames, which is, for how much range and how fast this move is, for what it accomplishes, very low recovery. Only -5 on block, which is perfectly fine. The only argument against this move, I feel like, is that other characters might not even be able to combo off of it sometimes, depending on like how you hit them or what you're hitting them with, but that like doesn't even really matter, to be honest. This move is like incredible. It's just like another far slash. It's also a 5k, like it's just everything you want a K button to be, basically. So Johnny's just good, right? Like it's somewhere in here. I've never really had to think about this move before, but this move is actually really good now I'm looking at it. I guess it's not as far range as Naga's, so it has a little bit less range, but it has low crush properties. It's just on a character that can't move. Yeah, I think it's probably the worst cracked 5k, but it's definitely very good. Next character we can do is Asuka. I think Asuka's is pretty standard as well. It's pretty similar to all these characters in this group where it pretty much meets the requirement of being a K normal. You know, like a 7 frame startup, only -3, 20 frames total. It's pretty big for the type of move it is, though notably one downside to this move is that it is actually not YRC or burst safe. He can't block in time if he does the move, which is a bit of downside. Obviously it's jump cancelable still, so you can hard bait, but it's not safe to those things like other moves are. So I think it's kind of just like a pretty standard K button overall. So Potemkin 5k sucks, right? Yeah, this is not it. Oh, there's 9 frame active. What if Giovanna had Potemkin 5k? Would that make it good? It still wouldn't be good because it's 10 frame startup. Yeah, so Potemkin's 5k is just not a very good move. It's 10 frame startup, which is really bad for a 5k. It is 9 frames active. That's like its best quality. It is a very active move, so it's like good for meeting or things like that. But otherwise, it doesn't fit the general purpose of a 5k. It's just a really goofy move. Next 5k we can talk about is going to be Leo's. And Leo is actually a really interesting 5k. So before we put on the list, we can like kind of talk about it. So the thing about Leo that you have to think about is that they basically gave Leo a bad 2D because of how his K buttons work. The downside to Leo's K buttons for him as a character are the fact that his 2D is unsafe on block. So he can't really like commit to 5k 2D like other characters could. However, on other characters that had like a normal 2D or just other Gatling options that are a better fit for the character, his 5k is actually pretty insane. It's a forward advancing button. You can kind of think about it like a slash normal in many ways. It's 9 frame startup, which is slow for a 5k, which is why you want to think about it more like a slash button. But it's good for tick throws. It's good for conversions because it moves you closer to the character, which is good. So I think overall it's probably a cracked 5k, but it's more niche in how it's used. So it's probably not for everybody per se. There are a lot of characters that would probably like to have this type of K button if they had another Gatling that worked better with it. So the next 5k we're going to talk about is another 5k that is actually pretty niche in how you want to use it, which is going to be Faust. And I'm going to put it at the bottom of cracked. The thing about Faust 5k is that it is very specific in what it does, and I actually think it's way better on Faust than it is most characters. So obviously everyone will point out that like it's a fantastic anti-air, which leads to high reward, which at least on Faust is very true. Most 5ks, if they anti-aired well, would lead to high reward for most of the cast, so I don't think that is that relevant for other characters. But it being a strong anti-air is pretty important. However, most other characters also have strong anti-airs, in their 6Ps or their 5Ps, so I don't think it's that important. Faust 5K, on the other hand, loses to low profile moves. So it's not as good for that general like space control that you want most of your K buttons to be good for. So it's pretty specific in how you use it. I do think there's a number of characters that would benefit from it and would be happy to have it, but it does have more specific qualities to it than some of the other 5Ks in good, which is why I'm going to put it in cracked for now, I think. Next up, we'll talk about Elfelt. I think Elfelt is also just somewhere like in good. It's a pretty standard 5K. It doesn't really have anything crazy going for it. It's -4 on block, which is a little bit worse than some of the other ones. For Elfelt in particular, it's like not even that crazy either because it doesn't really pair well with the rest of her kit. I think she'd rather have some other 5Ks in the game. Otherwise, it's just like a generally like good 5K, controls space in front of you, decently fast. Really nothing remarkable about it. Next character, which is one of the very best 5Ks in the game, and I don't think it is even remotely debatable how good this move is going to be Ram 5K. I think at this point, it is by far the best 5K in the game. It is really funny to me that they nerfed the low profile or the low crush on Nago's 5K, which is a character who needed it more because he's a big body. He benefits more from having something like that, but they didn't remove it from Ram 5K for some reason. Ram's 5K is so good. It is one of those moves that like when you think of a good 5K, this is honestly the move that comes to my mind. It is like the definitively the 5K that you would want your character to have. If you want to look at like what is the like best box standard 5K, it is absolutely this one. When you have something like Mei 5K, Mei 5K is a little bit different because it's like a slash normal almost. This is the 5K of the game basically. 7 frame startup, which is standard, 20 frames total frame, which is very good for a 5K, -2 on block. It low crushes like crazy, and the range on it is insane. It's one of the farthest reaching K buttons in the game. On Ram, it is also particularly good just because of her movement speed and everything. But if there are other characters that had other like Gatling options off of it, it would be even better for them. Yeah, this is just like an insane normal, and the fact that they didn't nerf it at all up to this point, it's kind of crazy to me. Okay, so the next 5K we're gonna talk about is gonna be Ino's, and I actually did not realize until doing this how good her 5K was. Her 5K is actually like extremely comparable to Ram's. There's only some like slight differences and slight downsides compared to Ram's, but it goes just about as far. It low crushes just about as well. I guess the main reason we really don't see it press that much is because it's, you know, on Ino, who can't move very well. This move is like debatably top 5 because it is very comparable to Ram's, but I'm just going to put it in cracked for now. If anything, I think it really puts into perspective how crazy it is that Ram has the 5K that she has, because it's very comparable to a character who has amazing normals because of the fact that she can't move, but Ram can move incredibly fast. Next up, we have Bridget's. I think Bridget's is probably somewhere near like the higher end of good. It does have fast startup at 6 frames, which is pretty good. 19 total frames, which is great. It's like a pretty good 5K. It just doesn't really like low crush or anything like that. It doesn't really have any special properties. It's just like a good 5K. So I think it's probably just like the top end of good. And then before we get to our final debate of this tier list, we're gonna have Sin, which I think is probably somewhere near the bottom end of cracked. It's actually like extremely comparable to Johnny's. It doesn't really have any differences outside of the fact that I'm pretty sure Sin's is also not YRC or burst safe. So now we're left with 2 characters, and I think we need to make some adjustments to the tier list now that I have things up there and we have more perspective. And I've been having a debate with the chat over here on Twitch about whose 5K is better between Sol and Kai's and whose 5K should be top 5 or not. I think the conclusion that we've come to is, first of all, I think we have to move Milia's down. Even though it does have the special property of canceling into itself, I don't think that the rest of the move is quite as cracked as some of the other 5Ks that are up there. So I think what we're going to do instead, as I was thinking about it, I feel like Ino's 5K has to be in top 5 because it's so comparable to Ram's. The only downside is that it's on Ino, who can't move. So by that logic, I feel like it has to be up here. Now, between these last 2 5Ks down here, between Kai and Sol, after thinking about it, the 5K that should be up here is probably Sol's. Now, the thing about Sol is that his 5K is very specific, right? It's not like that general purpose space control 5K in front of you like all of these other ones. However, it is a 3-frame button, which is super privileged to have in this game. It is a fantastic anti-air. It would give a lot of characters probably combos that they did not have previously because it's a 3-frame move. A lot of characters would have a lot of things opened up to them, whether it's combos or frame traps, if they had a 3-frame move. A lot of characters would like to have an anti-air like this. A lot of characters would like to have a defensive tool like this. Even though it's specific in what it does, other characters have 2Ks that can kind of cover what their 5Ks do already. You know, if you look at like Axel and Testament and Ram and characters like that, they can replace their 5Ks mostly with their 2Ks. So instead, I'm going to be putting Kai 5K at the top of cracked, and I personally understand that if you put this move in your top 5, this move is insanely good. The biggest thing about Kai 5K is that it is active for literally 5 ever. This move has insane amount of active frames for a 5K like this. It is 8 frames active, which is insane. And it's still only 25 frame, or it's still only 20 frames total duration. So it doesn't even have like a bunch of added recovery frames or anything. It's just active forever. It has a great hitbox. This move notably is actually able to hit Stroke and Hover Dash from Ino, which means that it's good at hitting low profile moves and moves that are supposed to low crush, so it's good at both. And it gives characters access to a safe on block meaty. With that said, I do want to know what you guys over on YouTube think. Let me know, what do you think are the top 5Ks in the game? What do you think is the worst 5K in the game? I want to know your thoughts. Do you agree with what I said? Do you disagree with what I said? If you did enjoy the video, please consider dropping a like and a comment. It actually really helps the algorithm, and I'd really appreciate it. I'm trying to grow my YouTube channel, so thank you very much. If you'd like to come and hang out with us over on Twitch, you can find a link to my stream down below. We talk about all sorts of fun things and crazy things over on our Twitch, so you can come hang out with us live if you would like to. Anyways, that's gonna do it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.